All right, hello, and welcome back to another edition of Go Big Orange Friday here on the Chase Thomas Podcast, where I'm still the aforementioned Chase Thomas, coming to you live from Knoxville, Tennessee, Everything School HQ, where I have power, Ryan has power, Jack has power, thankfully, because it was crazy this week, some crazy wins. So thoughts with the good folks here in East Tennessee that went through some craziness. I know people that just got power back today. Just absolutely crazy what went through East Tennessee and a little bit back in the home state. But to talk all things Tennessee Volunteers on this very program, Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider is back. Ryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Doing better than my power's back. It was down for about 24 hours. There's one road into the apartment I live in. Tree collapsed, so I was trapped in the apartment for Rick Butler, shout out. RTI had to come pick me up and take me to practice the next morning. So not nearly as bad as people that just got power, but the storm had did some damage over in my neck of the woods. What about you, Jack?
How are you? Of always College Football, the Omaha Productions hat, repping the merch here.
Right.
How are you, sir?
Doing well. Got not too much longer till I'm back on campus for my final semester, so excitement's starting to build a little bit, and just, summer's almost over. It's sad that that's happening, but hey, football seasons when this is airing, we're 15 days away from week 0. I'm all about that.
Yeah. And then how many days until Tennessee? September 2nd? I thought it was the 3rd this whole time, and then someone was like,
it'll be
2nd.
22.
Okay.
Yeah.
22. Who's the best 22, Tennessee number 22 of all time?
Heath Schuler.
Yeah.
I think that's a no-brainer.
There you go. I can't think of a better one.
I don't think Navy Schuler's the best 21 of all time.
Was he 21? He was probably 21, actually. If Navy Schuler were 21, Heath Schuler's probably 21. I just got the number wrong.
Well, Navy is 21.
I know.
It would be kind of weird if Navy were 21 and his dad was 22. So I'm going with Heath Schuler's 21.
21.
And hand up, listeners,
Ryan,
if you're watching.
Oh, he was 20. He was 21 at UT.
Okay, can we all just agree it's Jack Jancic?
Ooh.
Jack Jancic, beast.
Preseason hero.
Jack Jancic, I'm telling you, man, he could be a good player at Group 5. I 1,000% believe that.
Dude, he was lethal in the spring game a couple times.
Yeah, every time we ever actually watch him we ever watch competition from Tennessee in a practice or scrimmage almost typically always the spring game. He's always making plays.
Wow. The one I can't quit and like my family never gave up on was like Brian Maurer. They were all like, Brian Maurer's good. Like, Brian Maurer should just play. Brian Maurer's got that dog in him. Like, he's just out here. You never know what he's going to do, but the guy's a gamer. Brian Maurer was just like the Tennessee folk hero during the Jared Garantano era, where it's like, there's nothing you can tell me that would suggest that Brian Maurer is not better than Jared Garantano.
Chase, you probably don't remember this. My very first time on the podcast, I think this is why I'm still here 3 years later, as we both bonded over Brian Maurer. We both thought Brian Maurer was the most talented quarterback in Tennessee's quarterback room going into 2020, which I don't even necessarily think we're wrong about that. He wasn't the best, but from a talent standpoint, he had some physical traits.
What did he do at SFA
Will this be 3 years here?
He was the backup at SFA, so he also threw an interception in an intramural game at Tennessee. So
I remember that.
You win some and you lose some.
Cool looking athlete, like the full like arm and leg sleeve and he looked pretty cool, and he was just fun.
You throw out some different arm slots. Again, granted, the quarterbacks he was competing with, Jarrett Garantano. We don't need to rehash. Everyone knows Jarrett Garantano. Harrison Bailey was the backup quarterback at UNLV last year.
Did he walk on at
now
Louisville?
Is a walk on at Louisville, and then JT Shrout, who started half the games for the worst team in Power 5 last year, and he transferred. I can't remember where he ended up at. So
didn't he go to Butch?
Is he at Arkansas State?
That's right, Arkansas State.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we knew it was bad, but looking back, it was shocking how bad the Jeremy Pruitt quarterback room was.
A little different than what it is right now, and where it's going to be.
Yeah, I would say so.
Like, we're now in an era where we might just alternate Georgia number 1 overall players, quarterbacks. Like, George McIntyre might be in the 2025 Tennessee boat, and then you had, obviously, Raiola this cycle to Georgia, and the one before Nico to Tennessee. Like, that would be kind of funny if we just start alternating number 1 overall QB talents. I'd be fine with that. That'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay. Man.
That would be good.
A different era. A different era indeed. Speaking of Vols football though, here on this very show, position preview. We're going to get into that on this show. We're going to talk about the first scrimmage fallout from this morning. A no pressure Joe from Bill Connolly this week, and Joe Milton being the most important player in the college football playoff race, which should keep things normal here on Rocky Top. The absence of Cooper Mays and what that might mean, but and maybe a little Vols basketball too. But let's start off with the first scrimmage in this week 2 of practice. Ryan, when you look at where things stand right now, what's come out about the scrimmage, Gerald Mincy looks like he got some reps at the right side. Ollie Lane having to play center right now. Just kind of the offensive line in a state of flux a little bit, but the defense, like Joshua Josephs, looks jacked. Like that was cool seeing him get off the bus. I'm like, oh, that's a pleasant surprise. Where are you at across the board here with Tennessee after the scrimmage and what's come out about it?
Well, I think it starts with the lines of scrimmage, and it's the $1 million debate always in all football when you're scrimmaging against yourself. Defensive line looks good, offensive line looks bad. Is that because the defensive line's good or the offensive line's bad? I mean, I think I can't remember what old Notre Dame coach said it, but it was something to the extent of, how'd you look at the scrimmage? Well, if our ones get to play our twos all season, we're going to be pretty good. It's just hard to tell. So I think certainly it sounded like defensive line won the day, especially early in the day, and the defense was ahead of the offense, which you kind of expect in your first scrimmage of camp on a day that was a little bit rainy, a little bit, at least the turf was wet, and it sounded like, obviously Cooper Mays wasn't out there. It sounded like some receivers were a little bit limited in what they did. So I think the big question with this team right now, we knew going into camp, but I think it's further developed in the first week of camp, is just the offensive line, where it's at. Cooper Mays' injury throws that into a greater state of flux, which we already knew it would be. And then obviously the defensive line looking good. And there's reason to believe a lot of could take a jump in that room. Tennessee's had a lot of really solid, good defensive linemen that are back. None of those guys have been great. None of those guys have been all SEC players. Can any of those guys take a next step forward? And I think you're seeing some guys play really well early on, like that scrimmage. But again, kind of hard to tell as they face a already kind of limited or questionable offensive line that's equally banged up.
It is weird, and it's going to be fascinating, Jack, when you look at this history with Glenn Elevy, right, where he gets the most out of less talented guys. He's never really had a bad offensive line wherever he's gone with Josh Heupel. So on that side of things, it's really hard to panic. But with this many parts, and I think they talked about it like being 10 deep, like they feel pretty good at like being able to interchange a lot of different dudes. But like Jackson Lampley in there at left guard, and you're like, okay, sure. Why is Andre Carriage not there? What's happening? Addison Nichols not really a factor here. It seems like with the second team anywhere. It's funny, like you can say, I'm not really worried about it. Like they're going to get the most out of it, and the tempo is just going to help things a lot. It's just them moving and moving. If the ball's moving, then you worry about the offensive line less. I think it's just really hard for me to like get in that mindset. I think we have to see it because we've kind of been conditioned these first 2 years that it's just been steady Eddie to this point. But I think this might be the most in flux we've ever seen, the offensive line. And because it's just, if this offense did not have the history that it did, I think if you looked at this offensive line and it was like Kentucky's offense or Mark Stoops' coach team, you'd be like, oof, this is kind of rough. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. But, just talking about your most in flux, I think that's 100% fair. That this would be the season to worry of all season so far in the Heupel era for sure. As we've known and documented all throughout the offseason, the tackle spot is probably the biggest liability that we thought. And then now throw in the Cooper Mays injury and the uncertainty at the left guard position, it does make you feel a little uneasy. I think I've said a couple of times on this podcast already, Tennessee's offensive line isn't going to regress completely, then Spraggins and Mays have to be really good. Well, if Mays isn't there and they're not getting these reps in the preseason, it's going to be difficult for that to come to fruition and for them to not take a big step back. It makes, the lack of star power, if you will, at the tackle position makes Mays and Spraggins' jobs that much more important. And this is not what you want to see at this point in fall camp with Cooper Mays having this injury.
Yeah. And we said, I think actually like a week ago, like you can make the case that like Cooper Mays is one of the most important players on this Vols offense. And you're like, well, Ollie got a lot of run at center 2 years ago, right? Am I misremembering that? Or was it 3?
Yeah, he went and played. He's got no in-game run at center. He went and got a run at left guard when Jerome Carvin moved over to center.
Yeah, okay, so Carvin moved over to center. Okay.
Yes.
And that was
Carvin's
in the Georgia
been such
game,
a good
right?
safety.
Yeah.
Cooper Mays missed 5 games that season, and he got injured in the midst of a number of others, too, that he couldn't finish. So, yeah, a lot of the games, Ollie Lane got experience. And Carvin was such a good safety blanket for Tennessee's offense. And, yeah, that's probably what we talked about. I wrote an article on 5 most important players on Tennessee's offense, and Cooper Mays is number 5 on there just because he's had that injury past. And all of a sudden, it's shown up again early on. And I think in some ways, there is a positive in that if Cooper Mays is injury prone and it's likely to miss some time, even if it's not a full game, in the midst of a game, it's good for Tennessee to really have to kind of be thrown in the fire with their backup center situation at the get-go before the season even starts. But to Jack's point, it's certainly when you're already talking about an offensive line with a lot of moving pieces and you're trying to get some continuity, it's pretty tough when you're starting center and kind of your rock, one of your leaders of that room, is essentially going to miss the vast majority of fall practice.
Yeah, but again, we'll have to see, and I think a lot of it comes down to what makes it more nervous. I think if Hendon Hooker was back, I don't think I would be as concerned about the situation. I think because
Joe's lack of mobility exacerbates the issue. That's 100%. It's more important to have a good offensive line now. Yes. And then you're going to have a worse offensive line, so it compounds the problem. I don't think it's going to be necessarily disaster. I mean, if Cooper Mays if it was a season-ending injury, then yeah, but it's not. So Joe Milton's just going to have to do a little more, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing when you talk about the level of concern, I think it's going to be fine against the Kentuckys, the South Carolinas, the Missouris of the world. It's when Tennessee plays Texas A&M, Alabama, Georgia, teams that have elite defensive fronts that you're worried that they can hold up. It's what happened to them 2 years ago. The offensive line was pretty good. They couldn't run the ball against Alabama. They couldn't run the ball against Florida. They couldn't run the ball against Georgia. And against everybody else, the tempo, it kind of carried the day and was enough for Tennessee to get by and be really effective. But you saw what they wanted to do. Obviously, it was really handicapped in those 3 games. I kind of had the same worries about those 3 games I just mentioned.
Yeah. But we'll see. A lot of time still to be had. I guess maybe not a lot of time, but it's just a lot of mispractice. And we'll see if that ends up mattering, those reps over and over again over the next week or 2 for Cooper and Joe to have to work with Ollie here. And then if Ollie's getting all this work at center, okay, well, that's kind of a problem because you needed him to get a lot of work at left because you kind of want that continuity. You want to build some kind of 5-man unit that you can count on for the majority of the year. But if Cooper's gone, like Ollie has to ship over because you don't have the depth at center to just have Addison Nichols, it seemed like, step in there, which is what you want so that Ollie can spend literally all fall camp just at left guard. I think that's the problem.
I'm curious. I agree, Chase. I'm curious as to what happened with the Addison Nichols backup center experiment. They moved him to center when he came to campus.
Yeah.
And then now Ollie's having to play center, and Addison Nichols was 4-star, highly touted recruit, and he can't fill in the gaps here as a sophomore. It's kind of, or I guess redshirt freshman. It's kind of concerning.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the ideal thought, and I wonder if it concerns the snapping thing. I mean, watching him freshman last year, he was very bad at it, and we heard Glenn Ellerby talk this week. They couldn't hardly get, they were struggling with the snap in one of the days that Cooper was out. So I wondered if part of it, but to me, it's twofold. Like, he's the third guy you've heard at left guard too, behind Karich and behind Lampley. So it just doesn't feel like he's much of a factor at all. And for a guy that I thought would have a great chance to be the backup center and even be in the competition to be the starting left guard, it's certainly disappointing. But at the same time, it's an offensive lineman in the SEC. It's his second year. I don't think you hit the panic button necessarily, but certainly not, kind of what the expectation or the hope was, I think, entering fall practice.
I mean, the thing too, which is so funny and why this sport is so weird, but like, who would have had on this podcast the starting 5-man unit for the offensive line for Tennessee against Virginia might be John Campbell, Jackson Lampley, Ollie Lane, Spraggs, and JJ Crawford.
Yeah.
Like, if it's any other offense in the SEC, someone looks at that and goes, "Woof." But because it's Josh Heupel and it's because of this Temple and because of this history and because he gets the benefit of the doubt here, which he should, we're like, nope, they should manage. It'll be all right. Like, hopefully that's the case. I don't know. I wonder if this is a year kind of like that year where Ollie had to move around, Carvin had to be at center. Like, I wonder if we're in for that kind of offensive line year where people are in and out. All we really had last year was Minty and Crawford alternating, but everything else was settled. Like Cooper, Carvin, Spraggs, and Darnell were just locked in. I think it's one of those things fans might have taken for granted because this year I think you're going to see the way things are headed right now. I think there's going to be a lot of mixing and matching, and I don't think it's going to be a clean year where we just have the 5 best offensive linemen playing together for a long-term stretch. Is my guess. It's my gut right now.
I mean, a lot of years are like that because you have so many injuries on the offensive line.
Yeah.
And last year it could have easily been like that. I mean, the Tennessee went through the whole season splitting reps at left tackle. Like, that's super.
Yeah.
And they did that not because of injury, because that's what they thought was their best option. So I kind of think as a whole, this staff doesn't value is the right word, but for the lack of a better word, I don't think they value the continuity maybe at the same level at least previous staffs at Tennessee have, and most staffs around the country. So you hear them talk about being 10 deep. You're not wrong that it's, you could look at who the starters could be against Virginia and kind of be like, woof, this isn't great. But I think there's some sort of comfort that they have in the chaos that they can mismatch and find the right guys, because it's kind of what they've done in the past.
Yeah, I think so. Well, changing gears a little bit here. No pressure, Joe. Jack. ESPN names Joe Milton the most important player in the college football playoff race. When you saw this and you saw Bill's reasoning, do you agree that Joe Milton is this all-encompassing, mercurial talent that could completely shift the college football playoff race depending on how he plays?
I originally, when I first saw it, I was like, okay, this is just absurd. But then I got to thinking about it, and it really does kind of make a lot of sense. Because, if Tennessee's in the CFP race, that means Joe Milton's had one heck of a season. That's just how I look at it. So he's such a boomer bust player in my eyes. I mean, he could just be good. That's for sure a possibility. But I feel like if Tennessee's in the CFP race and this is talking about the CFP race, then Joe Milton's probably one of the biggest players in college football. So for him to be one on this list makes sense to me, because if Tennessee's in the CFP race, Joe Milton's been that dude. Maybe I wouldn't put him on. Maybe I put an Ohio State quarterback one. I don't know. But, Tennessee has to beat Bama or Georgia to be in the CFP race. And to do that, Milton's got to be a dog. So I think it makes sense. He would be at least, in the top 3 or so.
What do you think, Ryan?
I would agree with that. And you have the element that Tennessee plays Georgia and they play Alabama, and Georgia's schedule is so bad that if Tennessee beats them and the way the chips fall, that could be enough to keep Georgia out of the college football playoff. I mean, if Georgia loses to Tennessee, here's the number of good wins they're going to have: 0. They still might get in with it, but it could. What's that?
Ole Miss is a good win.
Yeah, it could be. It could be a good win. It could be
on the road. Maybe
at home. No, it's in Athens. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, look. Yeah. I mean, that doesn't mean it's not a good win, but an offense that's kind of predicated on running the ball. Good luck going into Athens and being competitive. But it makes sense in some ways. But I kind of tend to agree with Jack. There's been so much talk that it's going to be boom or bust for Milton, and I get that. Like, I understand that. I think still the most logical thing is it's going to end up being somewhere in the middle, or it's going to be a thing. The comparison I think I made on here before, like Bo Wallace, where he's good, and then a couple games it's disastrous. It falls apart for him. So I understand the logic. I'm a little hesitant to think Tennessee's in the range to be that Joe Milton's going to be good enough to make Tennessee a real serious college football playoff contender.
I also think he could be good, and it doesn't matter. Like, good can still be 9-3. Like, Joe could have a pretty good year,
right? But then he's not relevant on this list.
Yeah,
Yeah.
So, like, I think the idea that people think where it's like, if Joe lives up to his potential, then Tennessee's a play. I'm like, no, I don't think so. I think Joe could live up to the potential, live up to a lot of the hype this year, and Tennessee could still lose several games and not even be a factor really for the CFP, because I think there's a path where the defense is still bad enough where it doesn't do enough, or the offensive line, which we're seeing, if they take a step back and Joe's getting killed and it's not really his fault, and you're seeing Joe play really well, like that might be out of his wheelhouse. And also just the schedule, like what if he has a duel against Georgia and Alabama and he loses both, but he plays well in both those games, and I mean, you're not sniffing the playoff at that point. So I think there's a path too for Milton to have a good year and it not really affect the playoff race. I don't think he has to be either. If he's awesome, then Tennessee's a playoff team, and if he's bad, then like I think there is a way around that.
But you just said that if Milton still plays great and Tennessee loses to Georgia and Bama, which is a possibility, that means Tennessee probably loses close to Alabama and Tuscaloosa, and by the time Georgia game rolls around, CFP rankings will have already been a thing, so they'll be in the race.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they'll be in it. I think. Well, it's so hard because I'm still at I want to do like a daily poll to see like, do I think Tennessee's going to beat Florida? And just to get a running tally in my head of where I'm at going into the game. If I had to guess daily what I've landed on more, it's definitely Florida wins in that game. And like, it scares me. I was listening to my way home, like Will and Tyler on 991 The Sports Animal, and Tyler is just like dead set on Tennessee winning at Florida, where he's like just bang the over with the early line, everything else. I'm like, not a chance. I can't do it. There's no way I'm even. I'm not even close to being there, and I understand like everything about Florida coming in this year, but like. Everything to start this offseason and the hype around all of this and the question marks I still have, there's no way that I can be that confident. And then you're looking at like a 9-3 potentially. I think my gut tells me the best case scenario for this Tennessee team this year is 9-3. That is my best case scenario for this team, is where I'm leaning more days than not. That's the best I can do mentally. I hope that changes, and I'm sure week 1 I'll just be like, playoff, let's go, when they're just bombing Virginia and then Austin P, and they outscore them both 135-7 over 2 weeks. I'm like, sorry, Vols are back, don't want to hear it, and gonna lose my mind going to the Florida weekend. But as of right now, before games have happened and I've gotten lost in the orange sauce, that's just where I'm at right now.
Best case scenario, 9-3.
Yeah, you're pretty pessimistic if you think truly best case scenario is 9-3. And I'll say it again, I've said it here before. If Tennessee loses to Florida, they're not going 9-3. That's a ridiculous notion that you think Tennessee going to Florida and then beat everybody else on their schedule, not named Georgia and Alabama.
So you think 8-4, 7-5 is more likely if they lose to Florida?
Yes, the 9-3. Yeah.
So who
definitely
do they lose
8-4, 7-5 is probably similar.
You said last week there's no way they're losing to A&M, so they lose to Kentucky if they lose to Florida? South Carolina?
I didn't say there's no way. I just said that's my stone cold lock of a pick. I mean, obviously, if I'm looking at a logic,
stone cold lock. Nothing changes stone cold.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to win that game because a lot points to it. But sure, South Carolina, Kentucky, Missouri, even like Missouri is just as good as Florida, and have fun playing there in mid-November in Columbia when it's just miserably cold and your season's not at a very good spot. You're not competitive anymore. Like if Florida's lost, UConn, Vanderbilt, those are the games after Florida on the schedule that aren't up in the air.
So the UTSA is up in the air if they lose to Florida.
Yeah, UTSA is up in the air if they beat Florida. I mean, I think they'll beat UTSA, but it's up in the air.
I mean, you could argue UTSA may be like close to being as good as better than Florida. Like Florida's
you want to talk about losing goodwill? You want to talk about losing goodwill? I mean, Tennessee loses to Florida, this Florida team, and then loses a home game to G5 UTSA right after. Like when we talk about like, oh, it could get ugly enough where we're like, you know, this fan base, you lose those 2 games back to back. I'm not kidding. Like just that week would be insanity after. Like he's out. Like everyone's just like, we're out. It was a fun 3-year ride. He put us in a better place. it's time to go for the next guy, the final piece with a good roster. You know that's how it would go, where it's like he guided us out of the darkness from the end of the Pruitt era, but it's time to move on. We've tapped out our potential. Like, if you lose those 2 games, he can't lose those 2. That's brutal. Can't do it. Can't. Nope.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think if Tennessee loses to Florida, I don't think I would necessarily pick UTSA to beat them. I just think it's in play. I'll have to Jack. Sorry.
No, I think if Florida, like, are you talking about? I mean, yeah, fans will be mad at Josh, but if they lose to Florida and UTSA, I think Joe completely just falls apart in Gainesville, and then against UTSA, he falls apart again the first half, and it's unsalvageable.
Yeah, I mean, he's gone at that point. Like, you can't do a whole year if you're staring at 7-5. So it might as well just move on to Nico and give him the reps. Like, you might as well.
I think just as likely as that is Tennessee doesn't stop UTSA for 4 quarters, and Tim Banks is a dead man walking the last 2 months of the season, basically.
Man, I'm telling you, I cannot wait for these games because there are sneaky.
Tennessee can hold them in the 20s.
What's that, Jack?
Said if Troy can hold UTSA to 12, Tennessee can hold them in the 20s. I don't think it'll be.
Yeah, I mean, they should. I think Tim Banks has done a good job overall. But when his unit completely disappeared with Tennessee in the college football playoff race, you do that again and lose a game you shouldn't lose. Like that's how you get fired, unless your defense top 15 in the country, which Tennessee certainly hasn't been. That's not Tim Banks' fault. The talent's not there. That's why, again, I think he's done a good job. But you lay multiple eggs in 2 seasons, changes happen. This has been a really negative podcast. We're not.
Yeah, we've gotten in the weeds here. We're
not getting people excited.
I'm terrified. Like the offensive line stuff, the scrimmage results that came out today, listening to some hypo quotes, or I'm like reading between the lines, between coaches speak and what actually happened here.
Words.
You can't do it.
You took 5 words and said this Tennessee team can't beat Florida in Gainesville. Can't do it. Those 5, the 3 paragraphs, Josh Heupel talked very glowingly about Joe Milton, but then said 4-minute offense, he needs to be better. That means Joe Milton was awful and can't play at this level. That's what
I moved on. That's what I read. I'm like, uh-oh.
You said, Nico's way better than he was in the spring?
Well, I think what he said that I think the thing about Nico though is he doesn't make the same mistake twice, and he's a fast learner. Like that tells me clearly he is very happy with where Nico is. Like I think that's what I took away from that. It's like he is very happy about Nico's development, and I think he came across with that line still a little nervous about Joe in big games, and so that's what I took away. That was that there was a coach's speak there where I'm like, there is something there because the Nico stuff was completely glowing.
I mean, sure, it was 4 words, and I think it honestly makes sense that Joe Milton hasn't started a ton of games in his career, so to stuff like that, the 4-minute drill, the 4-minute offense, 2-minute drill, that's gonna be dicey. I think that's just fair. We talk about him managing the little things, the little parts of the game in the offense, and I think Heupel has expressed a lot of confidence in his understanding of the offense and his ability to get them in the right plays and the right tempo and all that good stuff. But that type of stuff. They practice it, but it's different when the games are on. And for a guy that's a 6-year senior and hasn't played a ton of football, that's going to be a learning process, and he's going to have to get better at it as the season goes along. And when you talk about the first 4 games of the season we just talked about are going to be catastrophic if they lose both of them and really bad if they just lose one of them, that's a fair concern, I think.
Jack, to get away from Ryan's pessimism and cynicism, because it's kind of bringing me down a little bit. The black uniforms, are they Tennessee's best?
Oh, come on. We covered this last week. I said the grays.
We didn't say black. We were talking about smoky grays last week.
I know. Then I said they were better in dark mode. So my answer is no. The black jerseys aren't the best. And you gave me crap for 5 minutes. So here it comes again. But no,
this is a 2-parter.
Are not the best.
All right, pivoting away from Jack again, who's wearing all black and just throwing heat right back at. Goodness gracious. But I will say part 2 though to this. Which is the game they wear dark mode for this year, do you think? They wore Kentucky last year. Who do you think they wear it for this year?
Well, let me look at the schedule.
While he's looking, Ryan, do you have one off the top of your head that they wear it for?
Yeah, I think the key is it needs to be a night game.
Yeah.
Dark mode is their best alternate. It's not better than any of the orange and white uniforms though. A&M I think has a good chance to be a night game looking at the SEC slate that day. So I think A&M would probably be my pick. Yeah, they have more options this year because when they have Alabama and Florida at home, they're wearing orange and they play games on the road. So they have plenty of choices. I'll say A&M though because I think that can be in that game.
Yeah, I'll say A&M's my first option. UConn's homecoming, maybe, but I'd say A&M first stop.
I feel like they want to save it for a big game. I don't think they want to burn dark mode for UConn. I could be wrong.
Well, they may wear it twice. They wore it twice last year, right?
No, they only wore it
2 years ago. They wore it twice. Yeah.
Oh, so I guess they could technically. Well, I think they only wore it twice 2 years ago because they didn't wear the smoky grays, right? I think that was part of it.
Right.
I don't know.
I think SC in Georgia. Yeah.
I think it's going to be South Carolina. That's what they wore it at home 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be South Carolina.
Don't wear it at noon for another day game, which that's going to be, and it's disgusting. But it would especially look worse now since they have black helmets too. It's full dark mode.
But would you be surprised?
Hard opposition on that.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't be surprised. The players would wear them every game if it was up to them. So
I just can see the vibe being like we're getting revenge. Like the whole week is like the South Carolina revenge week, and they bring out the dark mode. I can already see the social media videos preparing for South Carolina being dark mode and just them coming back from the dead to beat up on the Gamecocks. My gut says South Carolina at home.
I hate the revenge narrative. If Tennessee's, concerned about that at all, then they need to change their way of thinking because they should not concern about a South Carolina game at home at the end of September.
Not right now, but like game week, if you're looking for extra stuff, I don't think there's any problem with propping that up, I guess would be the way to phrase it.
1998 to 2003. The similarities are endless.
2023. Not
2023. What did I say?
2003.
Oh, definitely not 2003. Who would that have been? Would that have been Rick Clausen? Would that have been Casey still?
No, I think that was Casey's senior year. And he got hurt and not Tim Banks. There was a Banks that was a receiver. He played quarterback for a couple games.
Not Brad Banks.
Can't think of his name. No. James? I don't think it was James Banks. I don't know. That was the.
No, you're right. James Banks. Played at Tennessee 02-04.
Okay, so it was James.
CJ Leak, Chris Leak's brother, was the backup and got benched, and Chris Leak was coming to Tennessee, and then the Leak family got very mad about that, and he flipped to Florida. I believe that's how the story goes. Which, I mean, granted, they did move a receiver to start a quarterback, so not exactly a ringing endorsement of CJ there.
However, the tweet reads, Ryan, and I want to get your take on this because last year it felt like 98. The similarities here: both teams preseason coaches polled number 10. Both 11-2 the previous year. Both teams played the Orange Bowl the year before. Both teams lost Heisman caliber quarterbacks to draft, but had a backup taking a starting role. The script with a keep quiet emoji. Feel like 98 to you, Ryan?
No. Al Wilson and Terry Berry ain't walking through that door to play on Tennessee's defense. Because he had one of the best defenses in the country in 98. There are those similarities, and I think that Milton, the T. Martin one, is particularly accurate because they both waited their time and thought they were going to be a starter at an earlier part in their career, and they weren't. So some of those similarities are like good conclusions, but the emphasis of like Tennessee's going to win the national championship because of those similarities or win the SEC, it's kind of nonsense.
It's the blue chip ratio for me. Like they're not there. They'll be there next year. They'll be in the ratio. This year they still will not be. I don't know. Is that how you feel, Jack, as well, or no?
Yeah, I feel the same as Ryan. I mean, it's fun. Like I love this type of stuff. I'm all about finding these types of trends and similarities. There's a great article on RockyTopInsider.com by Rick Butler too about it. But yeah, like it's not going to happen. It's all just a coincidence, but it is fun to talk about.
Yeah, I think it'll be there. I think offensively, like to Ryan's point, I think there is a lot of similarities there in terms of Joe and kind of the question marks about T coming into the year. Like he was not a sure thing. And a lot of Tennessee fans were like the sure thing. You knew exactly what you were getting in Peyton and Hendon, and I think they were kind of operating the same way. They kind of had that same mindset where they were just kind of study warriors, just super leaders, just cerebral in a lot of ways. Like I think there were a lot of similarities between Peyton and Hendon. And then I think Joe and T have those similarities, but I think it's the talent on defense. That's the difference. It's just, I think that's going to hold them back. And that was like one of the differences last year when people were like feeling like 98. I'm like, maybe the run defense, but the secondary is not quite there yet to do that kind of LSU type run from the Joe Burrow era. But last thing on Tennessee football here, as we continue our positional preview series, Jack, what do you make of this year's defensive line depth? Are you excited? Who are you most excited about? Do you think it's going to be better than a year ago? Do you see sacks being up? Who are you most excited about? And right now, if you had to guess on August 10th, who leads this team in sacks, who would you guess?
Oh, I'm taking Josh Josephs to lead the team in sacks. Been high on him all offseason. I think he's the most likely to be as dominant as Byron Young was for Tennessee last season. I think Tyler Barron will take a step. Don't know how big of a step he can take, but I think he'll be really solid, and I think Roman Harrison's underrated too. When you talk about the interior, the depth is good. It's not great. If Elijah Simmons has another injury-riddled season, it won't be that great, but he looks good in camp right now from what I've seen, and he has a lot of potential. I was impressed with Omar Norman Lott back in spring camp when I watched him. Of course, I hadn't seen a lot of him in fall camp. And then
what number is he?
55.
55.
Okay, that's why I can never identify him. Like, I've never, in any video or anything I've seen, I'm like, where is Omar Norman Lott? I've never seen him. I feel like I should see him at some point. I never see his name anywhere. 55. Okay.
I'm the same way. He was working inside one day at practice this week, and it was like him and I think Wesley Walker, a couple of guys who'd been working inside earlier in the week. I was like, all right, 55, who's that? Oh, Omar Norman Lott. Didn't even.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm going to be looking for 90-something for him.
55 is. He looks good.
Yeah.
Like, oh yeah, that makes sense. It's the guy everybody's been talking up all summer and in the fall.
Yeah, he's the mystery man. It's going to take me 4 weeks to figure out who 55 is on the field. Like, he's going to make plays. I'm like, who the hell is 55? And why is he in the backfield again? And it's going to be Omar Norman Lott. He's going to start, it looks like.
Yeah, again, they'll play four guys a ton. So
yeah.
But I would say, I think him and Amari Thomas right now, if you maybe rank the defense tackles I feel best about for Tennessee, it's Amari Thomas 1 and Omar Norman Lott 2.
Yeah.
Do you think Norman Lott will start over Eason?
Yeah, that'd be my guess. But again, I think the reps will probably be pretty similar.
Yeah. Gotcha.
I wonder too, so Josh Joseph looks great. James Pierce, when I watch these videos, and I love the Rodney Garr football pull when they're doing the circle drill. Love it. Live for it. It's one of my favorite things in the Rocky. Also, where's the music on Rocky Top Insider videos? Like, part of the practice videos for me is I watch it for that. I need the pump up music to. It's the same one. And it speeds up as it goes along. I'm all about it because there's no talking, no anything. I need it as I'm getting pumped up during my lunch break. But I look at it and I'm like, oh, James Pierce, I think looks the most physically gifted behind Caleb Herring. Like, I don't want to just put some outrageous expectations on guys. Caleb Herring, very excited about Caleb Herring. Like, I think he's probably like starting edge guy next year. Like, he is already so ahead of the curve and because I think I was listening to somebody talk about defensive linemen. It's like part of edge guys. It's just, there is teaching, but it's just overpowering dudes. Like, if you are super fast, you're extra twitchy, a lot of it's just like, it's some natural feel and size and strength. And I just feel like Caleb Herring's just going to be a natural, really, really good edge guy who's going to be on the field soon. Like, if I had to rank terms of upside over the next 2 to 3 years, I think it's right now Caleb Herring 1, 2 James Pierce, 3 Chindavian, 4 Joshua Josephs. Now, do I think Joshua Josephs will be that low in terms of actual production? No. But I just think when people talk about Josephs, I'm like, I don't know. When I watch him, maybe he's solid. He just gives me a lot more of a Tyler Barron type vibe to me than a high upside, big double-digit sack guy in the SEC. Maybe that's just me, but I just see it more from James Pierce. If anyone leads this team in sacks and it kind of makes the jump, I think it's Pierce from what I can see. Because I think it's going to be hard for Caleb Herring to do too much as a freshman.
Disagree. I completely
I don't think Pierce will
disagree.
get the reps.
Joseph's is way ahead. He's way ahead of Pierce right now. He's going to get.
Do you think so?
A lot more. I think he'll get a lot more snaps than Pierce. A lot. I do agree about Caleb Herring. Whatever, Caleb Herring live with Josh Josephs all offseason and make him do every single thing Josh Josephs did to add weight and strength last year to Caleb Herring, and Caleb Herring will be an all-SEC guy by his junior year. I'm with you there. I'm not with you on James Pierce being more likely to be leading Tennessee in sacks, 8, 9, 10 sack guy than Josh Josephs is this year. I'd be stunned.
I wouldn't be stunned. He just has the size to me.
Is Pierce even going to play like that much?
He better. I hope so.
I think he will.
Roman Harrison's definitely ahead of him. I think Josh Joseph's definitely ahead of him. I think he's pretty even with Caleb Herring probably right now. I mean, maybe injuries happen and he gets more opportunities, but again, I think you're right. The ceiling's high, but this season I don't see it.
What'd you say, Jack?
What was that?
I think Tyree West is ahead of him.
Well, Tyree West is working at strong side D end.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think he's probably in a pretty similar spot to Pierce is at strong side D end is like the third guy there.
Who's the second guy there?
Dominique Bailey.
Yeah.
Oh, that's right, Bailey. I forget about him a lot.
Yeah. Dominique Bailey and Bryson Easton, I feel like, are very similar in the fact that they're just like super steady guys, solid against the run. Like, I just don't see the next level, them making a real jump and being like a real good pass rusher or just super big difference maker.
Is he from?
Jump for a lot of guys in that room. I don't really see it for either of them.
Is Bailey a Memphis guy?
No, he's a Maryland guy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Him and what was the linebacker who was there for like a year and then transferred? They were part of that big Pruitt class when Pruitt was just shooting at a remarkable rate. No, the next class, Pruitt's class that fell apart when he got fired. It was the COVID class. Aaron Willis, that's his name.
Oh yeah, I forgot all about Aaron Willis.
In St. Francis. I think Dominique Bailey is like one of 4 dudes from that recruiting class that's still at Tennessee. So
that's wild.
Yeah.
Goodness gracious. Quickly here, Vols basketball. Ryan, you were a sicko over the last week watching Vols in Italy. What was your strongest takeaway based on what you saw from this Vols team in Italy?
I think, it's hard to glean these takeaways from games that they won by like an average of 38 points. I think the biggest thing that stuck with me was Jordan Gainey in the sense that I think he's going to battle to be a rotational guy this year. All of a sudden you go from all the conversation to me about rotation being wing and post, and there's still questions there, and Chris Ledlam leaving is a big part of the wing being less of a question. But Jordan Gainey looked really good, and his shooting ability, which we knew was solid. Again, that's the one I pumped the brakes on. What I really liked was how Dalton Connect and Jordan Gainey kept shooting with confidence when they went through cold stretches. That's really easy to do playing European style with more possessions in games in summer where no one's at and you're killing teams. But the fact that what really stood out to me with Gainey is I thought he created a little bit better offensively and particularly defense. I mean, he's night and day better than Freddie DeLeon right now defensively. And certainly Freddie DeLeon's ceiling is a lot higher. I think his offensive ability he's probably the most talented offense player in Tennessee's team. And for that reason, I think it's probably likely that Gainey is the guy that gets left out from the rotation. But if DeLeon doesn't live up to that, or Ziegler is slow when he gets back from injury, Gainey's going to be pushing, and he's not just going to be an afterthought this season. Like I think was kind of my thought when he signed with Tennessee.
I don't know, Jack. I feel like if Gainey is pushing for time, or Gainey's playing 10 to 15 minutes a night, especially in SEC play, the season's gone off the rails.
Well, I mean, if he's a great defender, then what do you expect? It's the Rick Barnes way.
Do you think he's going to be a great defender?
Ryan saying he's light years ahead of Freddie DeLeon defensively tells me that he's going to compete just off of that.
Freddie DeLeon's a little ole at times. White guys just going past him at a rate that's concerning. But again, it's months away from the season. I'm sure they'll get that figured out.
I'll iron that out.
With your general thought, Chase, it's probably not ideal for Tennessee if Gainey's playing 10 to 15 minutes a night. The off the rails comment is very overdramatic.
I'm never overdramatic on this podcast.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like you. You didn't. You
3
definitely
years, never overdramatic.
5 words Josh Heupel said today, and talked about that, and then immediately said in the next message, "There's no way Tennessee beats Florida." Let me find a direct quote because it wasn't that, but it was very much.
Yeah, the listeners need to hear.
Much similar. Never been more certain or losing at Florida. That was the comment.
I read it and I was like, I'm checked out. I'm out again. Like, Heupel can't be playing with my emotions like this. Can't do it.
Seems like for Hype to say this tells me Joe is rough today. I try to talk you off the ledge. Perhaps, but it strikes me as something to jot down just in case. Never been more certain or losing at Florida, though.
Okay. Well, I don't think...
Let the people behind the scenes.
Wow.
The Hype
Don't go to
quote,
the Tennessee baseball portion of our DMs. Stay away from the Cal Stark era.
The people do not need to hear
era.
what Chase was saying after Tennessee started the season 0-2 and lost to Grand Canyon.
Oh my God.
Hey, Grand Canyon was a good ball team.
Were they? Did you see him in Omaha?
No, but they were.
See Arizona in Omaha?
They had a top 10 pick.
Great. Tennessee had a bunch. Tennessee's put more dudes in the Major League Baseball than anyone else in the last 2 years. Don't know if that's true. Just gonna say it.
On Big J journalism going on tonight on the Chase Thomas podcast.
I love how when Chase
We're
laughs,
just saying things. Don't fact check us.
When he laughs, his head just completely disappears.
I waited for Ryan to take a sip of water when I unleashed that one. I was hoping Ryan would spit it across the table.
I'm going to mean myself, much like Eric Kane did this week. Luckily, the water was already down by the time I processed what you said, at least.
Wait, what happened?
Well, Eric Kane on the Locked On Vols podcast said something like,
"Oh,
Joe Milton out there in shorts,
Vols
are looking great."
Yeah,
he got tweeted out. Yeah,
and Danny White tweeted it out.
Yeah, the Danny White troll.
Yeah.
The real Danny White account.
Yeah, I love the idea of Danny White's keeping up with all the different Vols podcasts just to be like, what is the temperature in the room right now? There's a joke I can make that I'm going to make off air about that. But I don't know. We'll see what happens with them. Final thing here as we wrap up, Jack. Case for and against starting Tobe Awaka. At this point, with Ledlam gone and with how this roster looks to this point, do you think they should go big to start things off with Tobe and Jonas Haidu to start the year?
I don't think that's their best lineup, but I think that's what'll end up happening with Jonas or with Tobe at the 4 and Jonas at the... Actually, I don't know. I think Jemai starts no matter what, and I think Santi and Freddie starts open season. So does that mean Tobe gets the 4 and Jonas gets the 5? That means Josiah's on the bench. It's hard for me to say. But the case for starting Tobe Awaka is that he's the best at getting rebounds on the team. He's a freak of nature. I mean, all the dude has done throughout the offseason is just look awesome. Every single stop. So, I mean, I think he has the most upside of anybody of all the post players at Tennessee. So, I think he allows you to maximize your potential if he's on the court at all times. And, you know, hopefully for Tennessee's sake, he's shored up a couple of other parts of his game.
Do you think that's what happened, Ryan? Or do you think we could actually see Tobe being big enough and someone Barnes trusts enough to start at the 5? And have Jonas come off the bench.
That's the best case, is him starting
right,
at the 5. He's going to have to play minutes.
Tobe at the 5.
Yeah. He's going to have to play minutes at the 5. Like, that's just a reality. So, in my opinion, this is why I think it was a good thing Olivier Campbell left. Like, throw these dudes in the fire. He's going to have to play the 5. He's going to have to play serious minutes at the 5 for you this season. So, lean into it immediately. And, again, that's kind of where it's hard to draw conclusions from the Italy trip. They were kind of platoon substituting, but they didn't play Jonas and Tobe Awaka much together. I mean, maybe 5 minutes over the course of 3 games. It didn't happen much. So to me, that was a positive sign. Again, they were platoon substituting. So I don't know how much I can really draw conclusions from that. But the case for it is that he's the Tennessee's best offensive big, and he's a beast on the boards. And all of a sudden, if you want to play 4 guards or Josiah starting at the 4 and shoot a lot of threes and have Tobe Awaka just a freaking garbage man down low, that you're going to score some points. That's your best lineup. Case against it is he's not as good defensively as Jonas would do. I think, to me, that's still my biggest question mark about him is understanding his defensive assignment, Obviously, he's not going to bring the rim protection that a dude does. That's just a reality. But can he be in the right place consistently? Can he be in good enough shape to be playing hard, super hard? And he plays super hard when he's out there. Is he in good enough shape that he can do that for 5 minutes at a time? That's kind of the case against it. And especially if he's going to be the 5 and you're going to play someone, Josiah at the 4, your defensive lineup there is going to take a step back. So that's the case against it, and probably, if you're making an argument for that, why that's not going to be the case, and why Barnes isn't going to stray away from defense, that's probably it.
I'm fascinated because I think this is going to be the most up in the air lineup we've had at Tennessee for a while. Like, I think you can make the case for a lot of different lineups, and that's why the series will be fun with Tobe, with Meshack, with Connect, with DeLeon. Like, Barnes is going to make some tough decisions. Doesn't mean you have to stick with them, whatever he picks this offseason, but I think it's going to be a very, very interesting season for Tennessee in a multitude of ways. Well, there you go. Jack Foster, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Omaha Productions and Always College Football this week?
Yeah, so yesterday, put out a big interview with Colin Cowherd. That was a lot of fun. Colin had a lot of interesting things to say, as he always does. About 30 minutes, he and Greg talking. So, that's one to check out tomorrow. There's some Tennessee talk on the pod. Greg gives MVPs and breakout stars for 10 teams, and Tennessee is one of them. And, we're just going to keep the college football content coming. Hopefully less and less realignment talk as we move forward, because trying to talk ball, man, like we said, 15 days away from the season.
Nah, give me that Cal and Stanford to ACC talk.
Yeah.
That's what that is my drive time talk.
On
That's
so
what I
many
want.
levels. If that happens, then...
Well, no, I wanted the Pac-12 and the ACC to merge. Like, I wanted to save college football for the next 15 years, where you get the Big 12, Pac, ACC, and the Power 2. And then we could have at least had the Power 4 for the next 10 to 15 years. That's what I would have hoped.
Okay, place your bets. Just quick answer. What happens to the Pac 4?
I think they
Mountain
all end
West
up in the
merger.
Mountain. Or I think Stanford and Cal goes independent, and then I think maybe even drop down. And then I think Oregon State and Washington State goes to the Mountain West.
My realignment thought, 2 realignment thoughts. First, Rick Pitino, great tweet this week. Shout out Slick Rick. Let's make football conferences, and let's make conferences for everything else. There's nonsense that we're doing all for money. Let's not hold every other sport hostage to it. Second thought, don't get me wrong, I think it's sad what happened in the Pac-12. I have a great deal of sympathy and empathy for Oregon State and Washington State. I feel absolutely no pity, not a teeny bit of pity for Cal and Stanford. Those athletic departments wanted to treat sports like they mattered, even just a tiny bit. They wanted to put a minuscule effort into caring about athletics over the 15 years. They wouldn't have gotten left behind. But those schools said this does not matter. Sports don't matter. They did not act like they were Power 5 football programs and athletic programs. So don't sit here and make me feel sorry for these snobby intellectual elites on the West Coast now that they got left behind when they don't care. So enough of the pity. I almost threw up listening to Notre Dame athletic director's quote yesterday. It made me sick to my stomach.
Oh my God. Late Night Ryan is an animal.
I don't think I actually told anybody that take yet either. So it's really been bubbling up over the last few days as I've seen the sob story for 2 athletic departments that care, 2 universities that care zilch about their athletic department. Only good thing that's come out of those athletic departments in the last 10 years is Nico Horner.
Wow.
He's not wrong at all.
I mean, that's just facts. They don't care.
And the Stanford one is even worse because
Jalen Brown came out
good.
of Cal. Jalen Brown was at Cal less than 10 years ago. When was Johnny?
They won all of 0 NCAA tournament games.
Hey, Ryan, hold up. Let's not forget you said Davis Mills was better than Trevor Lawrence, so he came from Stanford. Let's not forget
I mean,
that.
Trevor Lawrence still the most overrated player in the NFL.
That's insane. That's just preposterous.
It's factual. He's mentioned like he's Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes.
No, he's not. That's not true.
No, it is true.
No, he's not said in that
podcast. Said it last year. He said it last year.
He's a top 5 quarterback. He's the 5th best quarterback in the NFL right now.
But he's
number
not.
5.
No one says he's in the same tier as Mahomes. No one says that.
No, it's literally Colin Cowherd. I have the tweet. Maybe not the same tier.
He is a huge
but it was
Lawrence.
Mahomes, Joe Burrow, Josh Allen, Trevor Lawrence. Get used to it every year. Laughable take. I will march down Broadway with Trevor Lawrence's head on a stick
Okay.
when the Titans win the
Hold on,
South
hold
this
on,
year.
hold on.
Wow.
Trevor Lawrence is closer to Patrick Mahomes than Davis Mills, though, for sure.
Oh, yeah. No doubt about that. The Davis Mills take was largely trying to be entertaining. And it was an awesome hill to die on for until week 7 of the football season this past year. And it also worked that nobody else in that draft class was any good at quarterback. I guess we'll see about Justin Fields, but he didn't particularly look great. Now he's a year younger.
No,
he is the same. He is the same.
Yeah, Zach Wilson,
Trey
Justin
Lance,
Fields,
Zach
Mac
Wilson.
Jones.
Yeah, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance. Whew. Yikes.
Whew.
Davis
Fields
Mills
is
still
okay.
probably better than those three. He's still in the middle of that draft class, I think. He's certainly not as good as Trevor Lawrence and Fields, though. What's that?
I think Mac is better than Mills.
Yeah, he probably is. But I could, be naive and debate it.
But I'll leave it at this. Chase, thank you. Trevor Lawrence is a top 5 quarterback.
Yeah, he's the 5th best quarterback in
Ryan is
NFL.
clearly wrong. Thank you.
Yeah, he's winning the NFC South for the next 8 years in a row. It's on lock. He came back from 28-0 against the Jaguars or against the Chargers at home.
See. We'll see when he went a full game in a row of must-win football games when he scored 0 points, and all we do was praise him. He couldn't get a freaking point against the Titans in the second half, and Josh Dobbs threw the game away. Couldn't get a first down against the Titans defense, but
I need you to...
Let's crown him. Let's all crown him.
I'm going to crown Timothy Lawrence.
4 touchdowns in a half. He'll come back from 27 zilch.
Yeah. Well, he was down 27 zilch because he threw 3 or 4 interceptions in the first half. Tom Brady is the only quarterback I've ever heard that could be lucky enough to get away with that and win a playoff.
I think that's a good company to be in, though.
It is good company to be in. He threw.
Ryan, you're gonna hate the next 7 years of the AFC South because it's over. The Jaguars have it on lock. It's not the
division's really bad. So I do think they will win most. Will win most years, but I don't buy into this thought that they're going to be perennial contenders. Whatever. Maybe the Jacksonville Jaguars will become winners. Maybe they'll do it. Maybe Trevor Lawrence will do it.
They got a hell of a coach. They got the coach and the quarterback, man. That's all you need. It's 2023. Come on.
Yeah, Calvin Ridley is going to be awesome. It's going to bother me because I could really use Calvin Ridley on my football team right now. It would be nice for Calvin Ridley to not play for the Jaguars and actually play for the Falcons.
No Drake London love?
I love Drake London, but Calvin Ridley was an important cog to this team and did not play football last year. And we needed Calvin Ridley to play football last year, and Calvin Ridley did not get anything really for losing Calvin Ridley. And they're a little thin. Scotty Miller's going to be playing important snaps for the Falcons at wideout. You know who I'd rather have in that spot? I'd rather have Calvin Ridley.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah. Glad he's doing better, but just kind of a bummer that Calvin Ridley is just not playing for my football team for nothing anymore. Ryan Schumpert, what can the good folks check out for you and the team over at RockyTopInsider.com this week?
Yeah, plenty of football coverage. You plugged it for me earlier. Takeaways on the basketball trip to Italy. So I'd add if you're a psycho and are caring about basketball a lot, 2 weeks away from football season. And yeah, we've had tons of content, tons of stuff from the scrimmage today. I had my 4 takeaways on what Heupel said. So check that out, and we'll have plenty of stuff as fall camp keeps rolling on.
There you go. Jack Foster, Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure, and I'll talk to y'all next week.
Well done, nephew. Chase Thomas Podcast. Hell yeah.